In silent deserts, colossal pillars stand like frozen giants, their purpose erased by the sands of time. They tower above us, daring explanation, yet refusing to yield it. Around the world, their kin endure. In Southeast Asia, temples carved into stone mountains seem woven with the earth itself. Off the coast of India, submerged ruins glimmer in twilight seas. High in the Andes, stone fortresses cling to cliffs defying both time and gravity. Who carved these wonders, and why do they speak in riddles? Were they monuments to gods, maps of the cosmos, or something far more mysterious? Now, picture yourself tracing your hand along ancient stone, or standing at dawn as light strikes monuments older than memory. And as we begin, don't forget, follow this channel to keep unraveling the secrets of our world. Then add your presence comment, the time you're listening, and where you are. Bimini Road, Atlantis's trace. Off the coast of North Bimini in the Bahamas lies a submerged structure known as Bimini Road, an alignment of large rectangular limestone blocks stretching for hundreds of meters in shallow water. Discovered in 1968, the formation sparked speculation that it was a wall, a pier or a road built by an ancient civilization, perhaps the fabled Atlantis. The blocks are generally around 2 meters long, roughly fitted together. Geologists have argued that they are naturally fractured beach rock slabs, while others maintain their regularity indicates human work. Without artifacts or tools, the origin of Bimini Road remains debated, fueling dreams of lost worlds under turquoise waves. Your curiosity is stirred when a Bahamian fisherman shows you sonar images he captured on his fish finder. The images reveal lines of blocks beyond the known Bimini Road, arranged almost like a right-angled intersection. "I see this every time I drop my net here," he says. "No one else cares. Maybe you will." Intrigued by the possibility of extensions to the structure, you rent diving gear and hire his boat. The sea is calm, shimmering like liquid glass. The smell of salt and diesel mingles. As the boat anchors above the site, you peer overboard and see outlines in the pale sand below. You slip into the warm water and swim downward, fins propelling you through schools of neon-colored fish. At 5 meters depth, the blocks materialize massive flat stones arranged in a linear path, some stacked atop one another, some slightly askew. Algae coats their edges. The clarity of the water allows you to see far along the line. You run your fingers over the limestone. The surfaces are smooth, corners worn. You notice that the stones beyond the known road form a perpendicular line, creating a T-shape. Between 2 blocks, you see a narrow gap. Curious, you slide your hand into the space. As your fingers touch the inner surfaces, a deep hum reverberates through the stones. The vibration travels into your bones and teeth. The sound is low and resonant, as if emanating from the earth itself. In your mind's eye, for a fleeting instant, you see images, a procession of figures carrying baskets, a harbor with boats, a wave crashing over walls. The vision vanishes with the hum. You pull your hand back, heart pounding. The hum ceases. Fish continue to dart around unconcerned. Back on the boat, you describe the sensation to the fisherman. He nods slowly and says locals avoid putting their hands between the stones because they sing. You research the phenomenon. Geologists explain that limestone can resonate when water currents flow through narrow gaps, producing low-frequency sounds. The effect could vibrate through your bones underwater. But what about the images? Perhaps your brain, primed by stories of Atlantis, conjured them in response to the hum. You read about the psychic Edgar Cayce predicting that Atlantis would rise near Bimini and wonder if his prophecy influenced your perception. Marine archaeologists you contact stress that beach rock forms in place and can fracture naturally into rectangular slabs, aligning due to currents and storms. Without artifacts such as pottery, there is little evidence of human construction. Yet the perpendicular blocks you saw challenge the natural model. Theories swirl like eddies. One holds that Bimini Road is a megalithic dock, built by an ancient maritime culture that predates known Caribbean civilizations. Another suggests it is the remains of a quarry where indigenous people cut blocks for construction, later submerged as sea levels rose. Skeptics maintain the formations are natural jointing planes in the limestone, with currents washing away sand to reveal them. Your personal experience with the hum invites more esoteric ideas that the stones store vibrations from past human activity, releasing them when touched, or that under certain conditions, underwater acoustics can induce visual hallucinations akin to sensory deprivation. A geophysicist notes that low-frequency sound can cause the inner ear to send false signals to the brain, producing imagery. Regardless, your dive has complicated your view of the site. Weeks later, the fisherman sends you a conch shell with a hole bored into its side. Found near the stones, reads the note, seems worked by human hands. Archaeologists examine it and confirm it was likely used as a trumpet. The shell, they say, could date back centuries. You place it against your ear and hear the faint roar of the sea. You wonder whether ancient people once stood on those submerged stones, blowing shells that vibrated through the limestone and water, creating hums like the one you felt. At night, you dream of walking along a stone road that stretches into the sea, waves lapping at your ankles, and of a deep sound that resonates through your body, carrying images from long ago. Bimini Road remains ambiguous, but your bone-deep memory of its hum makes you feel the trace of something older than stories. Atlantis, the Atlantean riddle. The legend of Atlantis originates with Plato, who wrote of a powerful island civilization that existed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, possessed advanced technology and military might, and fell into the sea in a single night of earthquakes and floods. Scholars have debated whether Atlantis was a real place, a Bronze Age city destroyed by volcano or tsunami, or a philosophical allegory meant to illustrate the dangers of hubris. The idea of a lost utopia has inspired explorers to search across the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, and even the Caribbean. Each proposed site, from Santorini to the Bahamas, ignites controversy. Despite centuries of speculation, no definitive evidence has proven Atlantis existed, leaving it hovering between myth and memory. You become entangled in the enigma when an oceanographer friend invites you aboard his research vessel off the coast of southern Spain. Our side-scan sonar picked up right angles on the seafloor, he tells you, over the phone, excitement crackling in his voice. It might be a natural formation, or he doesn't need to finish the sentence. You imagine walls and streets submerged for millennia. You join the crew. The deck smells of diesel and salt, and gulls wheel overhead. The scientists show you sonar readouts, rectangular shapes arranged in a grid buried under layers of sediment. The coordinates correspond to an area not previously mapped in detail. As the boat pitches gently on the swell, you feel a tingle of anticipation. The next morning, they deploy a remotely operated vehicle, ROV, equipped with cameras and lights. Hours later, you watch live footage from the ROV as it descends through green water. Sunlight fades. The screen shows only the circle of illumination from the machine's lights, surrounded by darkness. At 120 meters, the seafloor comes into view, rolling dunes of sand dotted with sea cucumbers and anemones. As the vehicle approaches the targeted area, the landscape changes. The camera reveals unnatural shapes, straight edges of stone partially exposed. There appears to be a low wall running parallel to a second wall, forming a corridor filled with silt. The stones are huge blocks fitted together with surprising precision. Sea fans sway in the currents like flags. The pilot maneuvers the ROV closer to brush away sediment with its thrusters. As he does so, the ocean floor trembles gently. A vibration felt through the ship's hull. Silt clouds swirl, and for a moment nothing is visible. Then, as the particles settle, geometric patterns emerge. Squares, circles, and meandering lines carved into the stone appear where blank sand was moments before. It is as if the sea itself shifted to reveal a hidden map. The patterns resemble labyrinth spirals and concentric rings reminiscent of Plato's description of Atlantis's concentric canals. A gasp goes through the control room. The tremor continues, subtle but persistent. Loose pebbles dance on the deck. You grip a handrail hard, thudding. The instruments show no seismic activity. This vibration seems localized, like a giant creature stirring beneath the seabed. Suddenly, the ROV camera captures a plume of bubbles rising from a crack in the stone. They rush upward and break on the surface around the ship, releasing a sulfurous smell. The patterns on the stones shimmer as sunlight filtered through the water refracts through the bubbles. Then the tremor subsides as quickly as it began. The crew exchange nervous glances. An engineer mutters that methane releases can cause such events. But you cannot shake the feeling that you have witnessed the seafloor awaken, showing you deliberately arranged shapes that were hidden for ages. Back on shore, you and the oceanographer pore over the footage. Some of the geometric carvings are unlike any known Mediterranean art. You consult geologists who suggest that patterns could be formed by low-temperature hydrothermal processes or by burrowing organisms. Others note that ancient cultures carved designs into stone outcroppings at coastal sites, and perhaps this area was above sea level 10,000 years ago when sea levels were lower. Your mind returns to Plato's story, a city arranged in concentric rings, an island beyond the pillars, a sudden submersion. Skeptics argue that Plato invented the story as a cautionary tale, but there are also traditions among Berber peoples of a lost land swallowed by the sea. You begin to explore ancient shorelines and earthquake records. Theories gather like storm clouds. One proposes that the newly discovered structure is an outlying port of Tartessos, a wealthy Bronze Age culture known from Greek sources and located in southern Spain. An earthquake and tsunami in antiquity could have submerged it. Another suggests that the pattern is a natural geological feature called polygonal cracking, misinterpreted as man-made. A more fantastical notion arises that Atlantis was not a single city, but a network of maritime settlements sharing a symbol language, and that the grid you saw is one node of that network. Some fringe theorists proclaim that the vibration you felt was the awakening of ancient machinery designed to keep the site hidden. Scientists on your expedition caution that the sonar data must be verified with further dives and coring samples. They remind you that the sea is full of right angles once you start looking for them. As weeks turn into months, the research vessel returns to the site, but finds it covered by shifting sand again. The tremor does not recur. You are left with hours of video and a sense of something vast just out of reach. Late one night at home, you dream of walking through a city of white stone beneath turquoise water fish. Darting through courtyards, sound-muffled sunlight, refracting into shimmering ribbons. The geometric patterns on the ground pulse faintly under your feet, guiding you inward. You wake with the taste of salt on your lips. A few days later, a package arrives from your oceanographer friend. Inside is a small stone fragment with carved concentric circles coated in dried salt. There is no note. You turn it over in your hands and feel a faint vibration, almost like a heartbeat, and wonder whether Atlantis is less a location than a story that reveals itself in tremors, glimpses, and riddles, inviting each generation to search again. Egyptian obelisks, ancient precision, monolith mastery. Egyptian obelisks are monolithic stone pillars carved from single blocks of granite, often weighing hundreds of tons and inscribed with hieroglyphs praising pharaohs and gods. They were quarried at Aswan and transported hundreds of kilometers to temples like Carnac. The precision with which they were carved, smoothed, and erected continues to amaze engineers. The unfinished obelisk at Aswan, still lying in its quarry bed, shows the process mid-work channels cut around it and cracks that halted the project. Scholars debate how ancient stoneworkers achieved such precision, with bronze tools, wooden wedges, and manpower alone. Some propose lost technologies or forgotten techniques involving abrasives and patience. The obelisks stand as testaments to Egypt's architectural prowess. You become part of the discussion when a master stonemason working on a modern restoration invites you to Aswan. You need to feel these marks, he says. They tell stories. In the granite quarry, the sun beats down and the pink stone glows. The unfinished obelisk rests in its trench, cracked and abandoned. Surrounding it, the quarry floor bears hundreds of cup-shaped holes where workers once pounded dolerite balls to carve. The stonemason hands you a metal rod and instructs you to tap the chisel marks along the obelisk's edge. You do so expecting a dull thud. Instead, when the rod touches certain grooves, a clear metallic tone rings out like a tuning fork. The sound resonates through the stone and into your hand. You move the rod along the surface and each groove produces a slightly different pitch. It is as if the obelisk is a xylophone waiting to be played. The stonemason smiles. They tuned it, he whispers. They knew the resonance of stone. You are stunned. The idea that ancient workers not only carved the obelisk, but tuned its surface to emit musical tones seems fantastical. You record the sounds and measure the spacing of the grooves. The frequencies correspond to intervals in ancient Egyptian music, as documented on harps found in tombs. Could this be coincidence? The stonemason suggests that knowing the resonant qualities of the stone helped workers detect cracks. A clear tone meant solid granite. A dull one indicated flaws. Or perhaps the obelisk was meant to sing when struck by the wind or during rituals. You research petrophonics, the study of rock sounds, and find that some cultures used resonant stones for ceremonies. The obelisk's tonal qualities might have guided its cutting. The metallic tones you heard feel almost alive, as if the monolith retains memory of the hands that shaped it. Engineers you consult are skeptical. They point out that granite's density and elasticity can produce ringing sounds when struck, especially along thin ridges. The grooves on the unfinished obelisk may inadvertently act like tongues on a xylophone, and the metal rod you used amplified the vibrations. They stress that this does not imply intentional tuning. However, acoustic archaeologists note that some ancient structures have sound-related properties, such as reverberant chambers at Carnac. They entertain the possibility that the Egyptians were aware of stone resonance. The stonemason continues to argue that workers used sound to monitor their progress, citing ethnographic parallels, where builders tap stones to check quality. The experience underscores the sophistication of ancient techniques beyond mere brute force. Theories about obelisk construction vary. One suggests workers cut channels around the monolith with dolerite balls, inserted wooden wedges, and soak them to split the stone. Another proposes that quartz sand and copper saws were used to saw the stone. Transport could have been achieved via sledges lubricated with water, as depicted in tomb paintings. Some fringe theorists claim lost technologies employing sonic levitation or unknown tools. Your experience with the ringing grooves adds a sonic dimension to the debate. Perhaps the craftsman intuitively understood that sound reveals structure. Or maybe the tones are incidental, enchanting you into attributing design where none exists. You remain open to both possibilities. After all, engineering and art were intertwined in ancient Egypt. When you return home, you replay the recording of the Obelisks' tones. They form a simple melody if arranged by pitch. You hum it unconsciously for days. Friends ask what tune it is, and you smile, saying, "It's the song of a stone that never stood." The unfinished obelisk lies where workers left it, 500 years ago, but in your memory it sings when touched. Whether or not the Egyptians tuned their obelisks intentionally, you now perceive them as not just monumental markers, but instruments that resonated with the earth, the river, and the sky. Next time you see an obelisk, you'll want to listen as much as look. Antikythera Mechanism, Gears of Time. In 1900, sponge divers off the Greek island of Antikythera discovered the wreckage of a Roman-era ship laden with statues and amphorae. Among the encrusted bronzes retrieved was a lump that, once cleaned decades later, revealed an intricate assembly of gears. The Antikythera mechanism astonished scholars. It was a geared analog computer capable of predicting eclipses and planetary positions with astonishing accuracy, crafted in the 2nd or 1st century BCE. Its sophistication seemed centuries ahead of its time. Fragmented and corroded, the mechanism posed riddles: who built it, and for what purpose? CT scans have reconstructed its dials and inscriptions, but its full story remains elusive. The device stands as evidence that ancient knowledge was richer and more complex than previously believed. You become part of the tale when a salvage company contacts you regarding new finds from the same shipwreck. In their warehouse near Piraeus, crates of artifacts await conservation. In one crate lies a heavy, barnacle-crusted disc with gear teeth visible beneath the concretions. The company's lead conservator, aware of your interest in ancient engineering, invites you to witness the initial cleaning. "We think we've got another piece," she whispers. You stand in a white-walled lab filled with the smell of seawater and chemicals. Technicians in gloves and magnifying visors carefully chip away at mineral accretions. Bits of coral fall like powder. As layers come off, bronze teeth emerge, interlocking in complicated ways. You note inscriptions in ancient Greek naming months and cycles. The artifact resembles the known Antikythera fragments, but some gears are of different sizes, hinting at functions not yet understood. For days you observe as conservators remove salts and expose delicate parts. The gears are finely cut, their tolerances far tighter than you would expect from ancient metal workers. You sketch diagrams and consult with epigraphers on the faded inscriptions which refer to the Metonic cycle and the games at Nemea. One evening alone in the lab, after everyone has left, you examine the mechanism under a lamp. Outside, the port city is quiet, and the wharf lights cast orange glows through the window. The air smells metallic. You notice that when you gently turn one gear, others respond with surprising smoothness, despite their age. Suddenly, without your touch, the central gear begins to rotate of its own accord. Slow at first, then steadily the bronze wheels turn, clicking softly. Light from the lamp passes through holes in a perforated dial and casts patterns onto the white ceiling. Concentric circles of tiny dots and symbols dance in motion, aligning like constellations. You watch as familiar star patterns appear: Orion, Scorpius, the Pleiades, along with others you don't recognize. The room feels colder. The mechanism hums faintly as it moves. After a minute, it stops abruptly. The projected patterns vanish, leaving only the bare ceiling and your startled reflection in the glass of a cabinet. You stand frozen, heart pounding. You check for drafts or vibrations, but find none. The gears sit motionless. You reach out to touch the mechanism, half expecting it to react, but it is inert. The following day, you mention the event to the lead conservator. She smiles politely and says fatigue can play tricks on the eyes. But later, when the lab is empty, she confides, "I've seen things I can't explain either." You dive into research on ancient astronomical instruments. Writers in antiquity like Cicero mention Archimedes building a device that modeled the motions of the heavens. Perhaps the Antikythera Mechanism was part of a tradition, and your artifact, if complete, could have projected star positions when properly lit. Could differences in metal contraction due to temperature cause gears to move? Could residual salts interacting with humidity generate microcurrents? The phenomenon you witnessed, however, seemed purposeful, a display of constellations across a domestic ceiling. Theories bloom. Some propose that the newly discovered piece contains a calendar for non-Greek constellations, maybe Egyptian or Babylonian, explaining the unfamiliar patterns. Others suggest that the mechanism was designed not just for astronomical prediction, but for teaching or ritual, perhaps used in a darkened room with lamplight to simulate the heavens. More speculative minds whisper that the device retains some charge from the seawater and that under certain conditions it remembers its motions. Skeptics insist that the rotation you saw was due to vibrations from nearby traffic, and that the projections were random reflections off the lab's metallic surfaces. Yet, you cannot disregard the way the gears moved without physical force, or the clarity of Orion's belt on the ceiling. The Antikythera Mechanism defies easy classification, bridging science and myth. Weeks later, as analysis continues, epigraphers decipher more of the inscriptions. One line mentions a year dedicated to a king of kings, perhaps linking the device to the court of a Hellenistic ruler. Another refers to eclipses accompanied by rituals. You are asked to write a report, but you hesitate to include the self-rotating gears. You fear professional ridicule. That night, however, at home in your apartment, you hear a faint ticking from your study. You enter and find your notes and sketches scattered. On the wall, arranged by some invisible logic, are your tracings of the mechanism's dials in an order that matches the sequence of constellations you saw. A feeling of connection with a 2,000-year-old mind washes over you. Did their creator intend the machine to speak across time? The bronze has been silent for centuries, and yet in your presence it moved. Whether the Antikythera Mechanism is simply an ancient computer or a device capable of more esoteric displays, you sense that its gears continue to turn in ways we have yet to understand. Bermuda, the triangle's shadow. The Bermuda Triangle, an area roughly bounded by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, has long been associated with unexplained disappearances of ships and aircraft. Tales of compasses spinning, communications failing, and sudden squalls have fueled rumors of alien abductions, portals to other dimensions, and sea monsters. Many incidents have mundane explanations: storms, human error, mechanical failure. Yet the myth endures, reinforced by cases like Flight 19 in 1945 and the USS Cyclops in 1918. For some, the triangle is a locus of anomalies. For others, it is a statistical fiction born from selective storytelling. Nonetheless, the allure of the unknown persists in the turquoise waters of the Western Atlantic. Your direct encounter with the triangle begins when a salvage captain contacts you about an abandoned yacht recovered east of Bermuda. The vessel, a modern catamaran, was found adrift, with lights on meals half-eaten and no crew aboard. "We towed her in, and now we need someone to read the logs," he says. You fly to Bermuda and board the salvaged craft, which sits quietly at dock, its white hull reflecting sunlight. Inside, the air smells of salt and mildew. The ship's logbook lies on the navigation table, filled with entries describing a routine voyage from the Bahamas to Bermuda. Then, halfway through, the handwriting becomes shaky. The entry reads, "Compasses erratic, horizon shimmering like water over asphalt, seas calm, feel watched." The next pages are blank. You inspect the yacht's equipment: GPS units are functional. Compasses are accurate at dock. You power on the autopilot and note the course settings. To understand what happened, you decide to retrace the vessel's route with the salvage captain. Soon, you are back at sea, the catamaran slicing through cobalt waves. Flying fish skitter across the surface. The sky is clear. Several hours into the journey, the captain points to the horizon. A faint distortion, like heat haze, appears where sea meets sky. As you watch, the distortion widens. The compass needle in your hand begins to twitch, then spin slowly. The autopilot beeps and disengages. The wheel vibrates under your grip. The water around you is flat, but the horizon ripples as if viewed through a lens. For a moment you feel lighter, as if gravity lessens. Your vision sharpens and colors intensify. A hum permeates the air. The captain curses and grabs the manual steering. The compass needle continues its slow pirouette. Then, just as suddenly, the distortion snaps away. The horizon becomes crisp. The needle settles north. The hum ceases. You and the captain stare at each other, unsettled. Back on shore, you review the ship's instruments. The magnetometer shows a brief spike in magnetic field, but no explanation for the horizon mirage. You speak with meteorologists who suggest a superior mirage due to temperature inversion could distort the horizon, but that would not affect compasses. Geologists note that the seafloor in the area has deposits of methane clathrates that, if released, can reduce water density and cause ships to sink. However, this does not influence magnetic fields. You examine other accounts of the triangle and notice a pattern of compass issues at specific coordinates. You map these and find they align with areas of known magnetic variation lines where true north and magnetic north coincide. The captain's log mention of being watched nags at you. Did the crew panic and abandon ship? There were no signs of struggle or sabotage. Personal belongings were undisturbed. Explanations proliferate. One posits that the area's combination of shallow reefs and unpredictable weather creates dangerous conditions that lead to accidents which are later embellished. Another points to underwater volcanic activity and gas emissions, causing sudden changes in buoyancy and electromagnetic fields. A fringe theory asserts that a crystal pyramid at the ocean floor interferes with navigation instruments. An aeronautical engineer suggests that certain cloud formations can generate electric fields that disrupt compasses temporarily. Some tie the incidents to the lost city of Atlantis, claiming ancient technology still hums beneath the waves. Skeptics maintain that the number of disappearances in the triangle is proportional to the traffic, and that similar areas worldwide have comparable statistics but lack the mystique. Your experience with the spinning compass and shimmering horizon could be a convergence of known phenomena, a temperature inversion causing a mirage paired with passing through a region of magnetic anomaly. Weeks later, the salvage captain sends you a package. Inside is a smooth black stone he found lodged in the catamaran's bilge. Its surface is metallic and slightly magnetic. He writes, "Thought you'd want this. Don't know what it is." You test it with the magnet. It responds weakly. You have it analyzed. The composition is unusual with traces of iron and titanium, but arranged in a way not common in terrestrial rocks. Could a meteor fragment have been sucked up with seawater, or did it fall from the sky during the compass anomaly? As you ponder the possibilities, you notice the stone feels warm in your hand, despite being at room temperature. That night, you dream of a sea without horizon compasses spinning, and a luminous triangle on the water that pulses like a beacon. Whether the Bermuda Triangle is a myth or a region of subtle overlapping phenomena, your brief encounter leaves you wary of shimmering lines and spinning needles, and conscious that the ocean holds spaces where human understanding wavers. Axeman of New Orleans, 1918 to 1919. The Jazz Butcher. Between May 1918 and October 1919, the city of New Orleans was gripped by terror. An unknown assailant broke into homes at night, attacked residents with an axe, and often left messages taunting the police. The killer targeted Italian grocers and their families, but also struck others seemingly at random. He wrote a notorious letter to the newspapers claiming to be not a human being, but a spirit and a demon, and promised to spare any home where jazz was being played on a particular night. Citizens filled dance halls in fear. Despite widespread panic, police never caught the murderer. The Axeman of New Orleans joined the ranks of America's most chilling unsolved crimes. Decades later, your path crosses this macabre history when you receive a battered wooden box from a woman in Baton Rouge who introduces herself as the granddaughter of one of the Axeman's surviving victims. Inside the box are letters written in Italian and English, never given to investigators. One letter dated June 1918 contains fragmented sentences describing a stranger's shadow watching the family grocery at closing time. Another speaks of hearing the sound of a horn where none played. The granddaughter begs you to read them and see if there is any clue to the Axeman's identity. Out of respect for the families and curiosity about the case, you travel to New Orleans, a city where humidity hangs heavy and jazz still drifts down streets paved with centuries of stories. You rent a small room in an old Creole townhouse whose shutters creak and floors tilt slightly. The scent of beignets and chicory coffee wafts in from nearby cafes, mingling with the mildew smell of old wood. At night, the French Quarter transforms into a dim labyrinth of gas lamps, music, and whispers. You sit at a kitchen table under yellow light spreading out the letters. The handwriting trembles on some, steady on others. Descriptions of nights of fear paint a vivid picture. Footsteps heard in alleys, knives hidden under pillows, friends sleeping in shifts. One letter describes hearing a saxophone's mournful wail outside at 3 a.m, even though no musicians were nearby. Another speaks of receiving a card addressed to "My dear shopkeeper," advising the recipient to keep your horn playing or you'll get the axe. As you read, the lamplight above you begins to flicker in a steady beat. At first you assume it's faulty wiring, but the rhythm aligns eerily with the syncopated beat of a jazz standard you'd heard earlier at a club. The flicker goes off, on, matching a swing rhythm. Then you hear soft footsteps above you where no one lives. They shuffle in time with the flicker. Goosebumps prickle along your arms. The light resumes its steady glow. The footsteps cease. The room feels crowded though you are alone. You rise and check the empty upstairs apartment. Dust motes dance in the air. No one is there. Back at the table, the letters seem to exude a faint odor of old tobacco. You cannot shake the sense of being watched. Over the following days, you walk the neighborhoods where the Axeman struck. Many grocery storefronts are now boutiques or bars, but the bones of the old buildings remain. Locals tell stories handed down from grandparents, how people kept axes under their beds, how they danced all night on March 19th, 1919, when the Axeman threatened to kill anyone not playing jazz, how some believe the killer was a jealous musician, enraged at Italian grocers for ignoring his music. You visit archives and pore over police reports. Suspects were numerous: a local man with mental illness, a serial killer from elsewhere, members of organized crime. None were convicted. You examine the letters again and look for patterns. Some words are underlined horn shadow mask. In the margins of one is a hastily drawn trident shape. Theories swirl as thick as gumbo. One posits that the Axeman was never a single person, but a group extorting protection money from immigrant shopkeepers, with murders committed by different hands under the same moniker. Another suggests he was a police officer using his knowledge of investigations to evade capture. Yet another more mystical explanation takes the killer's letter at face value, that the Axeman was a malevolent spirit tied to music appeased only by jazz. The flickering lamplight and phantom footsteps lend unsettling weight to the supernatural angle. Skeptics counter that your experiences could be attributed to faulty wiring, old floorboards, and suggestion, heightened by reading terrifying accounts. But you notice that the pattern of underlined words in the letters corresponds to the structure of a jazz scale. 6 notes repeated in varying order. Perhaps the letters hide a musical cipher, pointing to a name. You consult a musician who deciphers the pattern as the opening notes of the Moochie, a Duke Ellington tune composed long after 1919. Coincidence? Or, part of the legend's evolution, on your last night in New Orleans, you attend a late set at a small club. The saxophonist announces the final tune, a slow blues in memory of unsolved stories. As he plays, you close your eyes. The music seeps into you like humid air. Images from the letters, shadows, horns, axes float through your mind. When you return to your rented room, the hallway is unusually cold. You find a new letter slipped under your door. Its paper is yellowed like the others, but the handwriting is modern. It reads, "Did you enjoy the rhythm? They always did. Keep your ears open." There is no signature. The next morning, the box of letters is gone from your kitchen table. Only a faint smell of tobacco and the soft echo of footsteps remain. Whether you were targeted by a prankster, a descendant playing games, or a lingering presence attached to the story, the Axeman's identity stays hidden. Yet the city continues to play its music, perhaps to appease whatever spirit demanded jazz over blood. Overtoun Bridge. Dog deaths, the call from beyond. In Dumbarton, Scotland, an ornate 19th century bridge spans a rocky gorge on the Overtoun estate. Since the 1950s, locals have observed a disturbing pattern: dogs, seemingly without warning, leap from the same side of the bridge, falling to the rocks below. Many are seriously injured or die. Witnesses say the animals appear transfixed before they jump. The phenomenon has spawned grim nicknames like Dog Suicide Bridge. Explanations range from the scent of mink or other animals luring dogs over the parapet to vibrations or sounds audible only to canine ears to supernatural forces. The area has long been associated with ghost stories. A widow once wandered the estate believing she could sense her husband's spirit at Overtoun House. No single cause has been confirmed, and the bridge continues to attract curiosity and caution. Your connection begins when an animal behaviorist invites you to observe experiments on the bridge. "We've placed scent traps to see what draws the dogs," she says. You arrive on a drizzly autumn morning. The stone bridge arches gracefully over a deep gorge filled with rushing water. Moss and lichen cling to the parapets. The air smells of wet leaves and river spray. As you lean on the waist-high wall and peer down, a sense of vertigo washes over you. The rushing water roars softly. The behaviorist brings out a Labrador on a leash. The dog sniffs the air, tail wagging. Suddenly, its body stiffens, ears pricked. It strains toward one particular spot on the parapet, whining. There is nothing visible beyond the wall, but empty air and the ravine below. The dog whines again, eyes focused on something you cannot see. For a split second, you feel an inexplicable urge to lean forward as if gravity intensified. A high-pitched hum just at the edge of hearing tickles your ears. The sensation passes when you step back. The dog relaxes. You look at the behaviorist. Her brow is furrowed. Later, the behaviorist explains that the spot where dogs jump corresponds to where mink nests were once found in the gorge. The scent of mink urine is enticing to dogs. She shows you chemical traps impregnated with mink odor placed by the parapet. Indeed, dogs show interest. However, the high hum and the sensation you felt cannot be explained by mink. You consult an acoustics expert who suggests that the bridge's design may focus low-frequency sounds from the water and wind, creating a standing wave that is audible to sensitive ears. Dogs with their acute hearing could become disoriented or agitated. Some dogs may misjudge the wall's width and leap on to what they perceive as solid ground. The urge you felt could be a mild form of l'appel du vide, the call of the void, a documented cognitive phenomenon where people briefly imagine jumping from high places. The hum might have heightened this sensation. Local folklore attributes the jumps to spirits or the thinness between worlds at Overtoun, a thin place in Celtic tradition. People walking the bridge at night report cold spots and whispering. Theories about Overtoun Bridge involve a combination of sensory cues and environment. Researchers from the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds found that mink, mouse, and squirrel scents are strongest on the right-hand side of the bridge where most jumps occur. Dogs following the scent may climb onto the parapet and fall. A veterinarian noted that most incidents involve long-nosed breeds like collies and Labradors, who are highly scent-driven. Others point to the bridge's architecture. The parapet is solid, but there are gaps in the corners that give the illusion of continuity. Dogs may not realize there is a 50-foot drop. Paranormal enthusiasts highlight stories of ghosts at Overtoun House, and a man who threw his baby off the bridge in '94 claiming the child was evil. They suggest a negative energy lingers. Your experience hearing a hum feeling pulled could be explained by the acoustics and cognitive bias. Yet the compulsion was real enough to make you step back. For dogs with heightened senses and instincts, such cues might be overwhelming. After leaving Dumbarton, you think about the dogs. When walking over other bridges, you occasionally feel a faint tug to peek over the edge. You dream of a stone bridge shrouded in mist, a dog standing on the parapet, ears, pricked eyes, fixed on something only it can perceive. In the dream, you hear a humming and feel your feet wanting to lift. You wake with your fingers gripping the bed. The Overtoun Bridge mystery remains partly solved. Mink scents likely lure dogs, but why this bridge and not others? The interplay of scent, sound, structure, and perhaps something we cannot measure creates a chilling effect. Whatever causes the dogs to leap, the phenomenon reminds you that senses can betray, and that sometimes a place carries a call only certain creatures understand. Flannan Isles Lighthouse, Keepers, 1900, The Vanished Watchman. In December 1900, a passing ship noticed that the light on the Flannan Isles Lighthouse off the coast of Scotland was dark. When relief keepers landed days later, they found the lighthouse empty. The clock had stopped, beds were unmade, and the logs recorded strange events, storms when the weather was fair, a feeling of dread. 3 lighthouse keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur, had vanished without a trace. Theories range from a rogue wave sweeping them into the sea to foul play or even supernatural intervention. The case has inspired ballads and speculation ever since its details lost to the wind and waves. Your journey into this maritime mystery begins when a construction contractor renovating the long decommissioned lighthouse contacts you. "We found something in a wall," he says with a thick accent. "You'll want to see it before the heritage guys take over." Intrigued, you catch a ferry to the windswept islets. Sea spray lashes your face. Puffins and gannets wheel overhead. The air smells of salt and guano. The contractor leads you up steep stairs carved into the rock. Inside, the white tower scaffolding surrounds peeling paint. He points to a section of plaster he has carefully removed. Behind it is a folded page from a logbook wedged between stones. You unfold it gently. In neat script, it reads, "Heavy sea above normal. Strange bird calls at night. The men uneasy." It is dated December 13th, 1900, 2 days before the disappearance. There is also an odd symbol drawn in the margin, 3 interlocking spirals. The contractor shrugs. "Weird eye," he mutters. He leaves you to examine further. You stay overnight in the keeper's cottage to examine the log in context. The weather is calm, the ocean a sheet of steel. That night, as you sit by the small stove reading a kerosene lantern on the table suddenly flares. The flame leaps higher, casting sharp shadows on the whitewashed walls. 3 silhouettes appear on the wall opposite you, shaped like men in oilskins and hats. They stand motionless, though you are alone. The silhouettes linger for several seconds. A chill runs down your spine. You call out, but no voices answer. The lantern returns to its normal glow, and the shadows vanish. You walk around the table. There is no one there. The room smells briefly of ozone, like air after lightning. You stand breathing hard, the log page fluttering in your hand. Outside, the sea is calm. Inside, you feel a presence. The next morning, you consider possible causes. Drafts can cause a lantern flame to flare. Your movement might have created that. The silhouettes could have been an optical illusion created by the pattern of peeling paint. The ozone smell might have been your imagination. You photograph the interlocking spirals on the log page and send them to a folklorist who identifies the symbol as a triskel, common in Celtic art, representing earth, water, and sky. Perhaps a keeper doodled to pass the time. You read more of the recovered log entries, mention waves crashing higher than the lantern room, a light that wouldn't stay lit, one keeper praying. The final line reads, "Our watch ends in darkness." It sends shivers along your spine. You talk to marine engineers who explain that freak waves can indeed sweep over 100-foot cliffs, and that the keepers might have been lost while securing equipment. But why would all 3 be outside at once? Regulations required one to remain inside. Theories about the Flannan Isles' disappearance abound. One posits that a rogue wave, an unexpected wall of water, rushed up the western side, carrying the men away. Evidence for such waves exists. Another suggests foul play, a passing ship might have abducted them. Some propose they staged their own disappearance. Folklore adds that supernatural forces like the Little People or Selkies took them. The flaring lantern and shadows you saw might be your mind filling in gaps in an already eerie setting. Or they could be a residual echo of the men's last moments imprinted in the lighthouse's stones. The triskel scribble might have been a talisman against fear. You cannot know. Standing atop the lighthouse looking out to sea, you feel the vastness and vulnerability of being the only soul on a rock surrounded by water. It becomes easy to imagine hearing strange calls and feeling dread. You leave the Flannan Isles carrying the log page in a waterproof sleeve to deliver to historians. Back on the mainland, you hand it over to the authorities. The Heritage Agency plans to preserve it. That night, you dream of 3 men huddled against a gale lantern light, flickering, whispering prayers. In the dream, a huge wave surges over a rock and an eerie bird cry pierces the wind. You wake with the taste of salt on your lips. A few days later, a storm hits the coast and news reports show waves crashing over seawalls. You watch and think of the lighthouse, the log, and the shadows. The mystery of the vanished watchmen remains, but for a moment you felt their silhouettes cast by a lantern in a lonely tower. Phoenix Lights. A sky full of questions. On the evening of March 13th, 97, thousands of people across Arizona reported seeing a series of lights moving silently across the sky. Witnesses described a V-shaped formation of 5 to 7 lights, gliding slowly, blocking stars as it passed. Later that night, a row of stationary lights appeared near the Sierra Estrella Range, blinking in sequence. The U.S. Air Force eventually explained the second set of lights as flares dropped during a training exercise. The V-shaped craft remains unexplained, with theories ranging from military aircraft flying in formation to extraterrestrial visitation. Governor Fife Symington initially mocked the sightings, but later said he saw the formation himself and could not identify it. The Phoenix Lights remain one of the most widely witnessed and debated UFO events in history. Your involvement comes when a college friend sends you an old VHS tape labeled 97 March. Found this while moving. The note reads, "Thought you'd like to see." You borrow a VCR from a library and insert the tape. The static clears to show a familiar balcony view over Phoenix. Your friend's voice narrates, "It's 8:20 p.m. Do you see this?" The camera pans to the north sky. In the grainy image, 5 lights in a shallow arc move slowly silhouetted against the twilight. They are steady, not blinking. Your friend gasps. "They're huge," he whispers, watching you feel a tingle at the base of your skull. Outside the film, your room seems to grow quieter. The lights on the tape glide for several minutes before disappearing behind a building. During the playback, the digital clock on your phone seems to stutter, switching from 8:37 to 8:39 in an instant. You blink and check again. The tape continues. A low-frequency hum emanates from the VCR like distant thunder. For a moment, you feel as if time stretches. Then the hum stops and the tape clicks to an end. You rewind and watch again. This time you note that the lights maintain relative positions, suggesting they may be attached to a single large object or are multiple craft flying in formation. You research local flight paths and find that the Maryland National Guard claimed to have flown A-10 Warthog aircraft in formation that night, though witnesses insist the lights were too large and silent. You consider that the time jump you experienced could have been a glitch in your phone or your perception. The hum from the VCR is mechanical, but you can't shake the coincidence. When the lights disappear behind the building, you freeze the frame and zoom in digitally. You see a faint curved edge connecting the lights, a possible artifact of the tape or a reflection. You recall that the event occurred across a wide area. Some witnesses saw the lights pass directly overhead and described seeing a solid craft blocking stars. Others saw separate lights moving independently. Theories about the Phoenix Lights cover a spectrum. The Air Force's flare explanation accounts for the later stationary lights, but not the moving V-shaped formation. Skeptics propose that residents saw a group of planes flying in military formation. At certain angles, their wing lights would form a V. Others think the lights were ultralight aircraft with underwing lights. Proponents of extraterrestrial visitation note the size and silence of the object described. Some people report missing time, suggesting psychological effects similar to those in other UFO encounters. Cognitive scientists note that the human brain is poor at judging size and distance of lights against a night sky. The time dilation you felt could be your intense focus causing you to lose track of minutes. The hum may have been the VCR's motor. Nevertheless, the mass sighting lends weight to the event's significance. Even if it was a human-made craft, its nature was unusual enough to leave a lasting impression on those who saw it. In the days after watching the tape, you find yourself scanning night skies for silent moving lights. You dream of standing on a desert balcony as a giant V of lights glides overhead, casting no shadow but filling your chest with a strange calm. In the dream, time seems to slow. You can count your heartbeats clearly. You wake with a sense of anticipation. The Phoenix Lights may never be fully explained, but the convergence of multiple witness accounts, video evidence, and official responses make it an enduring mystery. Your friend's tape added a personal dimension, and for a moment a hum and a skipped minute made you feel part of something larger than a solitary viewing of a VHS. Rennes le Château, the priest. The treasure and the secret perched on a hilltop in southern France, the small village of Rennes le Château became famous after stories spread that its 19th century priest Bérenger Saunière discovered a great treasure or secret while renovating the church. Saunière suddenly gained wealth, rebuilding the Church of Mary Magdalene with bizarre decor, erecting a belvedere called the Tour Magdala, and entertaining visitors lavishly. Rumors swirled that he found parchments revealing the location of a treasure hidden by the Knights Templar, or secret genealogies proving Jesus survived the crucifixion. Authors like Gérard de Sade, and later the creators of the Da Vinci Code, spun tales of hidden bloodlines and sacred feminine mysteries centered on Rennes le Château. Historians argue that Saunière made his money selling masses and religious trinkets. The true source of his wealth remains contested. You are drawn into this enigma when a distant cousin doing genealogical research contacts you. "Our great-grandfather served as a mason at Saunière's church," she says. "There are family letters you should see." You meet her in Rennes le Château on a hot summer day. The air is filled with the scent of lavender and baking stone. In a small cafe, she produces brittle envelopes bearing postmarks from the 1890s. One letter contains a sketch of the church's altar and a list of Latin phrases copied from parchments. "He wrote that the priest asked him to hide these," she whispers. That evening you visit the church. Its interior is odd. A statue of a demon supports the holy water font, and inscriptions warn, "This place is terrible." As you examine the altar, you notice a loose tile. Beneath it is a cavity containing a folded scrap of parchment. Your heart races. You carefully open it. Faded ink spells out a passage from John, but between the lines are tiny red letters forming another message. As you decipher, a drop of liquid falls onto the parchment. Red spreads across the page as if ink were bleeding anew. A strong scent of roses fills the air. You hear a whisper behind you, a single word in French, "Garde." You turn. No one is there. You pocket the parchment and leave shaken. Back at your cousin's house, you examine the parchment under a magnifying lens. The red ink that spread seems to have come from the paper itself. Perhaps humidity reactivating a dye in the parchment. The smell of roses could be from incense burned earlier in the church. Saunière was known to use strong scents. The whisper might have been wind passing through a narrow gap. The hidden message you decode translates roughly to, "Shepherdess no temptation that Poussin Teniers hold the key, plus 681. This is almost identical to the famed Sion parchment published in the 1960s, hoax associated with Pierre Plantard. You realize the parchment you found is part of a later planted mystery, not a genuine 19th century artifact. Your cousin is disappointed but intrigued. The real mystery seems to be how and why such hoaxes were inserted into the church. Later research shows that the altar tile you lifted had been replaced in the 1970s during a tourism surge. Still, your sensory experiences in the church felt real and unsettling. Theories about Rennes le Château encompass treasure secret societies and elaborate hoaxes. Some claim Saunière found a cache of Visigoth gold or Templar documents. Others believe he discovered genealogies proving a Merovingian lineage from Jesus and Mary Magdalene. The Priory of Sion, revealed as a 20th century fabrication, fed these theories. Many researchers now conclude that Saunière's wealth came from misusing fees for masses. Tourists and writers embellish the story. The weird decor in the church reflects Saunière's personal taste and symbolism rather than secret codes. The bleeding parchment you found may have been planted by a modern tour guide to thrill visitors. The rose scent and whisper could be coincidental, yet the power of Rennes le Château lies in its capacity to turn coincidence into meaning. A letter from your ancestor connecting your family to the site adds to the personal mythos. After leaving the village, you notice rose scents more often. You dream of walking through a church lit with candles, parchments bleeding on the altar, voices whispering, "Keep the secret." You wake with Latin phrases on your tongue. Though you uncovered a planted clue, the experience reminded you how easily stories grow. Rennes le Château remains a magnet for treasure hunters and conspiracy theorists because it sits at the intersection of faith, money, and myth. Your cousin continues tracing your ancestors' life, and you feel a strange bond with a mason who carved stone under a priest with secrets. Whether Saunière found treasure or created an illusion, the village has become a living riddle, and you have added your own footnote to its pages. Roanoke Colony, Croatoan, and the Vanished Settlers. In 1587, a group of about 115 English settlers established a colony on Roanoke Island off the coast of present-day North Carolina. Governor John White returned to England for supplies. When he came back in 1590, the settlement was deserted. Houses were dismantled. A single word, Croatoan, was carved into a palisade post. No sign of struggle was found. White took the carving to mean the settlers had moved to Croatoan Island now, Hatteras home of friendly indigenous people. Weather and wars prevented him from searching. Over centuries, the fate of the lost colony has been debated: assimilation, with local tribes, death from disease or drought, or relocation to other areas. Archaeological evidence suggests some settlers integrated with indigenous communities, but no definitive answer exists. You become involved when a coastal archaeologist invites you to test ground-penetrating radar on the site of the Roanoke settlement. "We're looking for post holes and middens," she says. On a humid June morning, you walk through live oaks draped in Spanish moss. The air smells of salt and earth. The site is quiet except for cicadas. You drag the radar rig across sandy soil. The screen shows layered shapes, potential ditches, collapsed pits. As you pass near where the palisade would have stood, the machine emits a sudden burst of static. The display flickers. On its screen, bright letters appear, ghostly but unmistakable: Croatoan. The letters glow for a second and then dissolve. You gasp, thinking it's a glitch. At that moment, a breeze sweeps through and you hear faint laughter like children playing far away. The archaeologist looks at you, eyebrows raised. She did not see the letters. Your hair prickles. The machine resumes normal function. Later, you discuss the anomaly with the technical team. They explain that electromagnetic interference, or low battery, can cause random artifacts on the radar display, sometimes resembling letters if one's brain seeks patterns. The static may have been radio interference from a distant transmitter. The word you saw could have been your mind layering meaning onto flickering lines primed by knowledge of the colony. The laughter you heard might have been wind in the trees or gulls. You review historical accounts. White instructed that if colonists moved, they should carve their destination. If under duress, add a cross. No cross was found. Archaeological digs on Hatteras Island uncovered European artifacts among indigenous sites, dating to the period supporting assimilation. Recent digs near the Chowan River found evidence of English ceramics, hinting some settlers moved inland. The simple explanation is that the colonists split up, joining tribes. Yet the carved word remains iconic. Theories about Roanoke's disappearance include massacre by hostile tribes, starvation, relocation to Chesapeake Bay, Spanish attack, and assimilation. Tree ring data suggests a severe drought struck the region between 1587 and 1589, which could have pushed settlers to seek help. Sir Walter Raleigh's colony may have been doomed by poor planning and lack of resupply. In 1607, Jamestown colonists were told of Europeans living with Chesapeake tribes, but these accounts were unverified. Genetic studies on local families have not conclusively shown mixed ancestry. Folklore grew, including tales of pale-skinned children with gray eyes among indigenous groups. The glowing letters you saw were likely a coincidence of technology and expectation, but they illustrate how the story haunts perceptions. Standing in that place knowing families vanished primes you to see messages. The laughter could be birds. Yet the moment underscores how the word Croatoan has become a symbol of disappearance. After leaving Roanoke Island, you find yourself writing the word Croatoan absent-mindedly in notebooks. At night, you dream of wooden houses surrounded by tall palisades of settlers debating whether to stay or go. In the dream, they carve letters into wood while children laugh. You wake with the taste of salt on your lips. The lost colony remains lost, but archaeology continues to piece together clues. Your fleeting glitch on the radar could be nothing more than that. But for a moment, it felt as if the land itself was whispering the colony's last known word, reminding you that history's gaps invite both research and imagination. Chupacabra, the goat drain. In the mid-1990s, reports emerged from Puerto Rico of a strange creature attacking livestock, leaving puncture wounds and draining the animal's blood. The creature was dubbed the Chupacabra, Spanish for goat sucker. Witnesses described it as reptilian with spines down its back and glowing eyes. Soon, similar stories spread across Latin America and into the southern United States. Biologists suggested coyotes with mange could account for sightings, but the legend took on a life of its own. Exsanguinated carcasses, UFO conspiracies, and tabloid headlines cemented the Chupacabra as a modern monster of the Americas. Your encounter begins when a rancher in rural Texas contacts you. "Something's killing my goats," he says. "No blood, just 2 holes on the neck. I got a carcass on ice. Want to see?" Part curious, part skeptical, you drive to his ranch under a wide blue sky. Mesquite trees dot the landscape. The smell of sun-baked dirt and livestock permeates the air. The rancher is stoic, his hat shading his lined face. He leads you to a freezer and shows you the frozen remains of a young goat. 2 puncture wounds puncture its neck clean and precise. There is little blood in the tissue. He tells you that over the past month, 5 goats have turned up like this. Coyotes usually leave a mess. He's heard stories of chupacabras and wants answers. You examine the carcass. The punctures are about 1 centimeter apart, deeper than typical insect bites. You observe no signs of scavenging. You cut into the tissue. Indeed, there is less blood than expected. You arrange for a necropsy at a nearby veterinary lab. That night, you camp on the ranch. The air cools, crickets chirp. In the distance, cattle low softly. Around midnight, a commotion arises from the goat pen. You rush over with a flashlight. 1 goat is down. Its sides rise and fall weakly. As you approach, something odd occurs. A pale blue mist seems to exhale from the goat's nostrils and mouth, forming a thin veil above its body. The mist thickens, taking the vague shape of a serpentine creature before dissipating into the night air. The goat gives a final shudder and goes still. You are stunned. You smell a metallic tang mixed with ozone. The blue vapor was silent, luminous, and unlike any breath you have seen. The next morning you examine the goat and find 2 new puncture wounds. The carcass again lacks blood. You report the phenomenon to the vet. He speculates the blue mist could be chilled vapor from the goat's warm breath condensing in cool air tinted by your flashlight. But the night was warm. He suggests bioluminescent bacteria or phosphine gas from decomposition, though the animal had just been attacked. The necropsy reveals that the goats did not bleed out, but suffered acute shock. The wounds penetrate to the jugular vein, but cauterization around the holes prevented bleeding. Coyotes do not cauterize. The vet notes that vampire bats in Mexico make small incisions and lap up blood, but they do not exist here. The rancher shares stories he's heard of hairless, grayish creatures seen dragging goats of government experiments gone wrong of aliens collecting DNA. Theories multiply. Some attribute Chupacabra reports to wild cannons with mange, whose emaciated appearance and erratic behavior make them seem otherworldly. These animals may bite livestock, and illness may lead to atypical feeding patterns. Others point to puncture wounds caused by prairie dogs or other scavengers after death. However, the absence of blood perplexes veterinarians. Some suggest a rare blood-sucking parasite could be involved. UFO enthusiasts tie the phenomenon to extraterrestrial cattle mutilations, claiming advanced tools leave cauterized wounds. A more mystical explanation holds that the Chupacabra is a spirit or demon that manifests as blue mist draining life force. Skeptics argue your mind immersed in Chupacabra lore interpreted a natural vapor as a creature, but you can still picture the blue shape hovering above the goat. Weeks later, DNA analysis of a purported Chupacabra carcass found near the ranch reveals it to be a coyote with severe mange. Its skin was hairless gray and stretched tight, and its teeth were elongated due to gum recession, giving a vampiric appearance. The vet leans toward this explanation, though it does not fully account for the bloodless goats. The rancher decides to install cameras. One night, they capture footage of a canid-like creature slipping through the fence, biting a goat, and lapping up blood. The bites are small but deep. The animal appears hairless with a gaunt frame. Its eyes reflect blue in the infrared light. It might be a diseased coyote or something else. The blue mist is never captured on video. You keep the rancher's case file in your office, along with a vial of strangely odorless blood. Sometimes you think you see a faint blue vapor when you open the vial. Whether the Chupacabra is a misidentified coyote, a vampiric bat, or a mythical beast your night on the ranch has made the legend feel uncomfortably real. Curse of the Pharaohs. The Tomb's Wrath. Stories of curses associated with Egyptian tombs have circulated since antiquity, gaining particular notoriety after the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. Several members of Howard Carter's team died under unusual circumstances, and the press dubbed it the Mummy's Curse. Ancient inscriptions sometimes warned that any who disturbed a pharaoh's rest would be punished. Scholars argue that many deaths were coincidental, caused by microbes or toxins in sealed tombs, or inflated by sensational journalism. Yet the idea of a curse persists, influencing popular culture and fueling cautionary tales about disturbing the dead. You encounter the legend firsthand when an antique dealer in Cairo invites you to his cramped shop filled with dusty statuary and faded papyri. "I have something you must see," he whispers. He produces an ornate gold necklace set with carnelian and turquoise. They say this came from a tomb opened illegally in the 1970s. Everyone who has owned it has fallen ill or suffered misfortune. He offers it to you at a price far below its apparent value. Against your better judgment, and curious about its history, you purchase the necklace. It feels heavy and cold in your hand. The dealer warns you to respect it. You walk back to your hotel through noisy streets, the necklace wrapped in a cloth. That night in your room, you unwrap it and place it around your neck. It warms almost immediately against your skin. You attribute this to body heat until you notice the room's light dimming. Shadows lengthen. The sunlight filtering through your balcony darkens, though the sun outside hasn't set. It is as if an eclipse has begun solely around you. You feel a pressure in your ears, and a faint whispering in a language you do not understand fills the air. Your heart races. You remove the necklace. The light returns to normal. The whispers cease. You stand breathing hard, the necklace cold once more in your hand. You debate whether your experience was psychological. Could the gold conduct heat so rapidly that it felt alive? Could your room's electricity have flickered due to grid issues? The darkening felt natural, like an eclipse, not electrical. You take the necklace to an Egyptologist who examines its design and declares it likely from the Third Intermediate Period, possibly belonging to a high priestess. He notes a small inscription on the clasp invoking protection from Sekhmet, goddess of plague. He suggests the piece may have been part of grave goods and thus considered taboo by superstitious dealers. You share the necklace's warming and the dimming of light. He smiles and recites the scientific explanations for curses, bacteria like aspergillus causing respiratory illness, ancient toxins, and the power of suggestion. He advises you to keep the necklace wrapped and not wear it again. Theories about mummy curses abound. One posits that tomb walls were deliberately painted with toxic minerals like arsenic to deter robbers, causing illness in those who disturb them. Another points to centuries-old bacteria and spores sealed in dark, humid tombs that can infect lungs when disturbed. Psychologists emphasize the nocebo effect. Belief in a curse can cause real symptoms. Supernatural explanations range from vengeful spirits to ancient magic encoded in hieroglyphs. Your experience with the necklace warms these debates. Perhaps the gold conducted your body heat, and the dimming was due to a cloud passing quickly over the sun. But the timing of the whispers and the sudden stillness of the air unsettle you. You learn that previous owners of the necklace experienced misfortunes. One died in a car accident, another lost their business. Correlation is not causation, but the pattern feeds the legend. You decide to donate the necklace to a museum. The curator accepts it eagerly, promising to research its provenance. A week later, he calls you, voice strained. I cataloged the necklace yesterday. Last night, my house flooded from a burst pipe. My wife broke her ankle. I don't believe in curses, but this is odd. He laughs nervously. The necklace is placed in a display case with a plaque explaining the curse narratives. Tourists marvel at its beauty, unaware of its recent history. You still think about the moment your room darkened and the whispers. Sometimes when you walk by a jewelry shop, you feel a slight warmth at your throat, as if the necklace remembers. Whether curses are microbes, psychology, or something ancient and beyond our science, the tomb's wrath remains a powerful story. You chose to respect it, and perhaps that's why you walk away with only a memory and a shiver when a shadow briefly crosses the sun. Ourang Medan, the ship of deathly silence. In 1947 or 1948, a distress call crackled over maritime radios in the Strait of Malacca. All officers, including captain, dead, lying in chart room and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. After a pause, I die. The coordinates corresponded to a Dutch freighter called the Ourang Medan. When rescuers arrived, they found the ship afloat but lifeless. The crew lay scattered, eyes wide, faces contorted in terror. The dog was dead, teeth bared. There were no signs of violence or fire, no damage to the hull. As the rescuers debated towing the vessel, smoke rose from the hold. They evacuated, and moments later the ship exploded and sank. No official records of the Ourang Medan exist in shipping registries, leading some to question whether the story is apocryphal. Others think it was real, but covered up due to hazardous cargo. The tale endures as an unsolved maritime mystery of ghostly proportions. Your connection to this legend begins when a maritime historian contacts you about a recently salvaged lifeboat found on a reef near Sumatra. It has markings matching descriptions of the Ourang Medan, she writes. The boat contains artifacts including a ship's bell and a logbook partially fused by salt. She invites you to inspect the items at a remote warehouse. Curious and skeptical, you travel to the humid port city. The warehouse smells of rope and seawater. The lifeboat sits on blocks, its paint peeling. Inside, you find the bell engraved with Ourang Medan, Rotterdam. The logbook is swollen and stuck together, but with care you pry open one page. The entry is dated June 1947. It mentions loading secret cargo in a small port on the Chinese coast. The ink is smudged, but you can make out powder-sealed crates and no smoking. As you read, you feel a chill even in the heat. The air around you seems to thicken. The bell vibrates under your hand, though no one touches it. A faint smell of almonds like bitter pits fills the air. Your throat tightens. The historian coughs. You both step back. The smell dissipates and the vibration stops. You exchange uneasy glances. Later you consider what could cause such sensations. The smell of almonds suggests cyanide compounds. Perhaps the secret cargo was potassium cyanide or nitrocellulose, both highly toxic and explosive. Cyanide gas could have leaked, killing the crew. Another theory posits that the cargo contained Wu-era nerve agents. Exposure would cause convulsions and terror. The bell vibrating might be due to distant traffic or your own pulse. Yet in the moment, it felt as though the objects remembered trauma. You research shipping records. There is no official listing of a vessel named Ourang Medan in Lloyd's Register. The historian suggests the ship may have sailed under a false name to transport contraband chemicals. After the crew died, residual heat or chemical reaction caused the explosion that sank the ship, leaving little trace. Some researchers link the story to U.S. wartime experiments or to leaking carbon dioxide extinguishers on board. Skeptics claim the entire tale originated from a 1948 article in a shipping magazine and spread unchecked. Explanations for the Ourang Medan mystery include suffocation by carbon monoxide from a malfunctioning boiler, poisonous gases from improperly stored cargo of sulfuric acid and cyanide, or a cocktail of nerve agents left over from war. Some fringe theorists suggest paranormal causes like ghost pirates or aliens. Others think the story was invented by sensationalist reporters. The logbook you saw, if authentic, supports the hazardous cargo theory. The smell and vibration you experienced in the warehouse may have been triggered by trace chemicals interacting with humidity. Old wood and metal can emit odors when warmed. The sense of heaviness could have been psychological, a reaction to handling objects associated with death. Nevertheless, touching a bell engraved with the ship's name and catching the scent of almonds made the legend tangible. It suggests a human tragedy involving secrecy and danger hidden by time and official silence. After you return home, the scent of bitter almonds occasionally wafts to you, unexpectedly perhaps, from cut fruit or a neighbor's cooking, but it always recalls the lifeboat. In your dreams, you stand on a foggy deck. Ghostly sailors lie around you, eyes wide. A bell tolls on its own. Smoke wisps from a hatch. You wake with your heart pounding. The Ourang Medan may be a myth, but artifacts can carry stories. Whether the ship existed or not, the tale warns of the perils of secret cargoes and the haunting of tragedies not fully acknowledged. The lifeboat sits in that warehouse, its bell silent now, but sometimes when you think of it, you hear a faint vibration as if it remembers a final distress call. I die. Amenhotep, Eyes Lost Necropolis. Necropolis in the shadows, Amenhotep. In the second pharaoh of Egypt's 18th dynasty, presided over a kingdom in transition, expanding trade, and consolidating power after the tumultuous expulsion of the Hyksos. His mortuary temple and mummified remains were revered for centuries. He was even worshipped posthumously as a patron of the craftsmen who built royal tombs. Yet, although his mummy was found in a cache of royal burials in the late 19th century, his original resting place, the necropolis constructed for his eternal sleep, has never been located. Ancient texts mention a tomb beautiful in the cliffs, but no archaeologist has identified it among the known sites. It is an absence in the landscape of Western Thebes, a missing piece of the story of Egypt's golden age. Your journey begins in Luxor, sipping tea with a former tomb guard who spent his life watching over the Valley of the Kings. His lined face is as weathered as the cliffs he patrolled. He leans in conspiratorially and tells you, "There is another valley. The pharaoh's tomb is not where they all search. My grandfather saw it. He describes a wadi far to the north, hidden behind hills, where shafts cut into the limestone lead to an unexcavated necropolis. No tourists go there. Even thieves fear it because of stories of voices in the wind." Intrigued by his tale, you arrange a guide and supplies. The desert sky is searing bleak as you ride a donkey along forgotten paths. The heat presses on your shoulders, and the smell of sun-baked stone mingles with dry sage. In your bag you carry a notebook, a flashlight, and a small offering bread and beer, the standard gifts in ancient times to present if you find anything. The hidden valley reveals itself slowly. The hills rise in jagged terraces, their sedimentary layers like pages of a book. There are no signposts, only cairns left by shepherds. The air tastes metallic, as if filled with fine dust. Your guide points to an inconspicuous ravine. Inside, carved into the cliff face, you find multiple doorways sealed with rubble. An oval cartouche faintly visible above one entrance appears to have been chiseled smooth long ago. There are no modern graffiti, no footprints. Only the whine of a lone fly breaks the stillness. You clear some stones and squeeze into the dark. The temperature drops dramatically and your sweat chills on your skin. The passage slopes downward and widens into a hall. Your flashlight beam reveals painted scenes of the pharaoh's Heb-Sed festival and the goddess Hathor welcoming him. Colors of cobalt and ochre remain vibrant. Reliefs depict Amenhotep wearing the red crown of Lower Egypt, and his mother Nefertari stands behind him. The artistry is fine, on par with royal work. Shards of pottery litter the floor. In the corners you see reed mats and baskets fossilized in place. It seems untouched. As you move deeper into the works, a cold draft brushes the back of your neck. It carries with it a faint sound like chanting in an unfamiliar dialect, soft repetitive syllables that ebb and flow. You stop and hold your breath. The air seems to come from nowhere. There are no cross shafts you can see. Your flashlight flickers, then steadies. The chanting continues, rising slightly in volume, the harmonics unfamiliar to modern ears. You feel the hair on your arms stand up. The floor beneath your boots has a thin layer of powder, and your footsteps make no sound. The paintings of Amenhotep, I look down at you with serene eyes. The cold draft circles weaving around your legs as if drawing you further in. It feels like an invitation and a warning. You follow the sound to a chamber at the end of the hall, where a large rectangular recess indicates where a sarcophagus once stood. The niche is empty. At the far wall, an uncompleted tunnel slopes downward. In the dim beam of your light, the walls of this tunnel glisten slightly as if damp. The chanting stops abruptly, and the silence that follows feels heavier than sound. With your heart thudding, you retreat to the entrance and breathe the hot desert air again. Back at the guard's modest house, you share what you experienced. He nods slowly. "This is what my grandfather said," he tells you. "He heard them singing to their lord. He did not go farther." You consult with Egyptologists, showing them photographs and sketches of the paintings. They confirm the iconography dates to the early 18th dynasty, and that the scenes are consistent with a royal tomb. But they caution that many tombs were started and abandoned or used by others. Some suggest the chanting could have been wind whistling through unseen fractures in the rock, creating natural tones that sound like voices. Others note that limestone caverns can produce resonant frequencies when air of different temperatures meets. Could your mind have interpreted a geophysical phenomenon as human? Yet the specificity of the words, the cadence lingers in your memory. Speculation flourishes. One theory suggests Amenhotep may have been buried in this hidden necropolis, originally then moved to the Deir el-Bahari cache to protect him from tomb robbers. If so, perhaps only the outer decoration was completed and the burial chamber left unfinished when his body was moved. Another proposes that this valley was intended to become a new royal cemetery, but was abandoned in favor of the Valley of the Kings during the reign of Thutmose I. A more mystical idea arises from a modern priestess who claims that certain ancient rituals left imprints of sound in stone, which can be triggered by those attuned to them. Skeptics argue that you experienced auditory pareidolia, the brain imposing meaningful patterns on random noise. Still others point to local legends of a chorus of jinns guarding treasures. Without a sarcophagus or inscription naming Amenhotep, explicitly the necropolis remains unconfirmed. And yet the art, the location, and the guard's story align eerily well. As you leave Luxor, you consider returning with a full team to excavate the uncompleted tunnel. But part of you wonders whether disturbing the valley is wise. On your last night, you dream of a corridor lit with oil lamps, voices chanting a litany that grows louder as you approach. When you wake, the scent of incense lingers momentarily in your room. Weeks later, a package arrives at your doorstep containing small woven sandals. There is no note, only a scrap of linen inscribed with the words, "He rests where the cliffs meet the stars." You hold the sandals to your ear and think you hear a faint hum of voices. Whether you discovered Amenhotep-I's lost necropolis or another forgotten tomb, the echo of those ancient chants continues to weave through your thoughts. The Carnac Stones, avenues of silence, stretching across the countryside near the town of Carnac in Brittany, France, stand thousands of upright stones aligned in long rows. Some weigh several tons and stand over 3 meters tall. Others are barely knee-high. Erected during the Neolithic period around 5000 to 3000 BCE, the Carnac alignment's purpose remains a subject of debate. Theories range from astronomical calendars marking solstices to processional pathways or territorial markers. Over centuries, myths have grown. Some locals say the stones are a Roman legion turned to stone by a saint. Others speak of them as petrified warriors waiting to rise. Despite extensive study, their true meaning is still unknown. You came to Carnac on a cold spring morning while backpacking through western France. A chance meeting at a hostel led to an invitation from a local archaeologist who was studying micro-erosion patterns on the stones. He offered you a ride to the fields before they opened to tourists in exchange for help carrying equipment. You agreed, curious to see the stones without crowds. The mist hung low over hedgerows as you walked among damp grass and wildflowers toward the first alignment. The stones emerged from the fog like silhouettes of stoic figures keeping watch. The air smelled of wet soil and sea salt carried from the nearby coast. Birds sang hesitant morning songs. You trailed your hand across the lichen-covered surface of a menhir, its granite cool and rough. Your companion set up a laser scanner to measure minute weathering. As you waited, you wandered down a row of stones. A curious stillness settled around you, your footsteps muffled. The wind died. The distant hum of a road faded. Ahead, the stones marched into the mist, their heights gradually decreasing. Suddenly, a low humming began, seemingly emanating from the ground beneath you. The frequency was just at the edge of perception, more felt than heard. The hair on your arms rose. You looked around. Your friend was adjusting his equipment, oblivious. The hum intensified, pulsing like a heartbeat. The stones seemed to lean ever so slightly inward, as if turning to face you. Then the sound stopped. The wind resumed, and the world felt normal again. You told the archaeologist what you felt. He smiled and said some people experience infrasound in places like Carnac, possibly due to the way wind moves through the alignments or resonance with bedrock. Later, in a small museum, you read about theories suggesting the stones could act as a giant musical instrument channeling sound along their rows. A 1960s researcher wrote about certain alignments producing a humming noise when struck with a mallet. A Breton folktale spoke of the stones singing on midwinter's night. Skeptical archaeologists dismiss these stories as fanciful, focusing instead on solar alignments and social functions. Yet, the hum you felt lingered in your bones. Possible explanations for the sensation include exposure to low-frequency wind vibrations. When wind passes over and between objects of similar spacing standing, waves can form, producing barely audible hums. Some researchers think certain frequencies can cause feelings of unease or awe. Another possibility is that the stones amplify distant industrial noises that normally go unnoticed, focusing them through resonant gaps. A more esoteric idea suggests that Carnac was designed to create sensory experiences with processions, timed to coincide with seasonal winds that would make the stones speak. Folklorists might argue that stories of petrified soldiers imbue the site with the sense of latent life, priming visitors to perceive subtle sounds as meaningful. Whether natural or designed, the phenomenon creates an intimate connection between stone, wind, and human perception. Since your visit, whenever you stand in long corridors between trees and parking garages, even in supermarket aisles, you sometimes pause and listen for a hum. The memory of mist and rows of granite shapes stays with you. The Carnac stones continue to weather under Breton skies, their alignment secrets still debated by scholars and storytellers. Each time a breeze sweeps through a line of pylons or across a field of sunflowers, you wonder whether some ancient builders understood the way tongue and stone could intertwine, and whether those who walked those rows thousands of years ago felt a hum under their feet connecting them to the earth and sky. Amelia Earhart. The Unfinished Flight. Amelia Earhart captured the world's imagination as the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, and she set her sights on an even more ambitious goal, circumnavigating the globe. In July 1937, with navigator Fred Noonan, she departed New Guinea for Howland Island, a tiny speck in the Pacific. Their Lockheed Electra never arrived. Radio transmissions' faded fuel was presumed exhausted, and an unprecedented search found nothing. Over decades, theories have proliferated. They crashed at sea. They landed on a remote reef. They were captured by the Japanese. Fragments of aluminum bones and rumors have surfaced, but nothing conclusive. Earhart's disappearance remains one of aviation's most enduring mysteries and a symbol of both daring and loss. Your involvement begins when you receive a call from a curator at a Kansas aviation museum. We've obtained some pieces of aircraft aluminum washed up on Nikumaroro, she says, naming a coral atoll in the Phoenix Islands. They match the thickness and rivet pattern of Earhart's Electra. We want an independent observer. Would you come? The invitation is irresistible. A week later, you are standing in a laboratory surrounded by glass cases of vintage flight instruments. On a table under bright lights lies a twisted panel of metal with stringers and rivet holes. The smell of oil and polish mingles with the sterile scent of steel. The curator hands you a pair of gloves and a magnifying glass. "Tell me what you see," she says. You examine the aluminum closely. Salt still encrusts some edges. Faint numbers stamped into the metal match manufacturing codes from Lockheed in the 1930s. For days you pore over technical manuals, photographs, and contemporary accounts comparing rivet spacing and skin thickness. At night you read Earhart's diaries, written in a voice full of determination and vulnerability. In one entry she writes of the constant roar of engines, the smell of oil, the infinite horizon. The museum arranges for you to travel to the Pacific to see the site where the debris was found. After hours in a propeller plane, you land on a strip of coral and are greeted by seabird cries and the warm slap of humid air. Nikumaroro is a low forested reef ringed by turquoise lagoon, idyllic yet isolated. Coconut crabs scurry among ironwood trees. The smell of salt and guano is pervasive. You set up camp near a rusting British colonial water tank said to be near where bone fragments were found in the 1940s. The night sky is an inverted bowl of stars with no light pollution. On the second evening, as you and your small team test an antique shortwave receiver to simulate Earhart's radio transmissions, a sudden crackle fills the air. At first it is random static, but soon it coalesces into a pattern of dots and dashes. You freeze. The sound is unmistakably Morse code. One of the researchers grabs a notebook and transcribes. The sequence spells out your own last name. For a moment, everything inside you goes still. Is someone on the team playing a prank, you ask, but everyone's faces are pale. The radio is old, not connected to any modern network. The battery is fully charged. There is no obvious interference source. The code repeats once, then the static returns to random hissing. A chill runs along your spine despite the tropical heat. The ocean is a dark expanse around the island, waves breaking on the reef. You keep listening, but the message does not repeat. Later, lying in your tent under the whining of insects, you cannot shake the feeling that some remnant of that last flight is still broadcasting its call into the world. The next morning, you inspect the radio again, hoping to find a loose wire or stray signal. You test the equipment in other locations on the island and hear only static. You hike to the island's south end where tide pools form at low tide. There you notice aluminum debris half buried in coral sand. You dig it out carefully and discover a portion of what could be an interior panel with a faded layer of paint. The shape resembles a patch known to have been applied to Earhart's Electra in Miami to cover a window. This find fuels your excitement and your questions. Yet the Morse code event haunts you more than the physical evidence. That evening you search for patterns in other supposed post-disappearance radio messages recorded in 1937. Several amateur operators claim to hear a female voice saying, "We are on a reef south of Howland." Others reported hearing coordinates that were garbled or incomplete. None of the messages were confirmed. What exactly did you hear and why did it use your name? You consult communications experts who suggest possible explanations. One proposes that a temperature inversion could have allowed distant stations to bounce signals in unpredictable ways, and that some random pattern of static coincidentally matched your name. Another notes that the human brain is wired to find patterns in noise. A more mystical suggestion emerges from a local legend that the spirits of those lost at sea sometimes call out to passing vessels, and that by speaking your name, they are acknowledging your willingness to listen. Skeptics remind you that the 1937 Electra's radio operated on frequencies unlikely to propagate that far. Theories of Earhart's fate multiply. One holds that she landed on the reef at low tide, used the radio until the batteries died, and high tide swept the plane into deeper water. The scrap you examined could be from that final resting place. Another posits she and Noonan were captured by Japanese forces and taken to Saipan. A third suggests that she was secretly on a spy mission for the US Navy. None reconcile easily with the uncanny Morse code event. Before leaving Nikumaroro, you walk along the shoreline feeling the coarse coral sand under your feet. The surf hisses like static. On a rock you see a piece of glass smoothed by the ocean. It could be a jar once containing a cosmetic some researchers say Earhart carried. It could be random flotsam. You pick it up and hold it to the sun. It refracts light in a brief rainbow. That night back at the museum, the curator asks if you have any conclusions. You have none. Earhart remains missing. The fragments remain ambiguous. But you cannot ignore the feeling that you were, if only briefly, contacted. Weeks later, as you fall asleep back home, you hear a faint imagined series of dots and dashes, and in the half-dream, you are once again on a reef with waves booming and a radio crackling. You wake and realize the call is still unanswered. Philadelphia Experiment. Invisible or imagined. In October 1943, according to an enduring urban legend, the U.S. Navy destroyer escort USS Eldridge was subjected to a secret experiment at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The goal, some say, was to render the ship invisible to enemy detection or to use electromagnetic fields to teleport it. Witnesses claim the Eldridge vanished in a green haze, reappearing minutes later in Norfolk, Virginia, before returning to Philadelphia. The story includes horrific side effects, sailors allegedly fused into the deck, driven insane, or disappearing. The Navy has denied any such experiment took place, and notes that the Eldridge was never in Philadelphia when alleged. Skeptics point to hoax letters and misremembered details, yet the tale persists in UFO and conspiracy circles. Your involvement begins when a retired naval archivist invites you to view declassified materials rumored to be related to wartime electromagnetic experiments. Come to the archive after hours, he says. Bring a grounded wrist strap. You arrive at a secure facility lined with metal cabinets. The air smells of ozone and old paper. The archivist rolls out a cart with a box labeled Project Rainbow, technical files. He stresses that these are likely mundane coil designs, but curiosity piques. You thread a reel of microfilm onto a viewer. The images show hand-drawn diagrams of coil arrays, capacitors, and field strengths. As you turn the crank, you encounter a photograph labeled Test 7. It depicts a ship wrapped in cables, generators humming on a dock. The photo is slightly blurred as if taken through heat shimmer. At that moment, the fluorescent lights overhead flicker. You feel a slight electric shock through your fingers despite the wrist strap. A faint metallic hum fills the room. The air feels charged. The archivist asks, "Did you hear that he looks pale?" The lights steady, the hum fades, and the microfilm image remains. You exhale. Later you examine the microfilm frame by frame. The blur in the photograph could be motion blur or a damaged negative. The cables around the ship align with known degaussing procedures used to reduce magnetic signatures. Navy ships used coils to counteract magnetic mines. The so-called Philadelphia experiment might have its origin in garbled accounts of these degaussing tests. The shock you felt could have been static discharge caused by low humidity and friction with the microfilm viewer. The hum may have been a transformer cycling. The wrist strap ensures you stay at the same potential as the equipment, but it can still tingle. You research the origin of the legend. A 1955 letter by Carl Allen Carlos Allende to UFO author Morris K. Jessup claimed he witnessed the Eldridge's disappearance. Allende's stories varied and lacked corroboration. Investigations found that the Eldridge's log placed it in New York. The Navy's Project Rainbow was a real code name for something else unrelated. Yet, your experience of hum and flicker lends a visceral feel to the myth. Explanations for the Philadelphia experiment myth include misunderstandings of degaussing, mistaken identity of ships, and hoaxes. Scientists note that making a ship invisible to light with 1940s technology is impossible. Bending light requires metamaterials not invented then. Teleporting matter would violate known physics. Conspiracy theorists argue that the government would deny such experiments. Some connect the story to Einstein's unified field theory, speculating that intense electromagnetic fields could warp space-time. Others see it as a Cold War-era allegory reflecting fears of wartime secrecy and uncontrolled science. The photo you saw might be of a ship undergoing routine tests the blur due to long exposure. The electrical tingle could be entirely mundane. Still, for a moment, you felt as if you were in a room where fields shifted. Stories gain power when small anomalies feed large imaginations. After returning home, you find yourself occasionally checking for flickers and fluorescent lights. You dream of standing on a dock as a ship wrapped in wires glows green and vanishes with a crack of ozone. Sailors scream. You wake with your heart racing, your fingers tingling. Rationally, you know the Philadelphia experiment is almost certainly a myth, built on misinterpretation and hoax. Yet the combination of a blurred photograph, a hum, and a shock created a bridge between wartime archives and a legend. Sometimes myths persist not because they are true, but because they tap into our fascination with unseen forces and the fear of what happens when technology goes too far. Queen Ankhesenamun's unknown fate. Lost, Queen of Amarna. Ankhesenamun, born Ankhesenamun, was a daughter of Pharaoh Akhenaten and Queen Nefertiti. She became the wife of her half-brother Tutankhamun, and later may have married the pharaoh who succeeded Tut. After Tutankhamun's death, Ankhesenamun wrote to the Hittite king Suppiluliuma asking for one of his sons to marry because she had no heir. The prince was sent but murdered en route. After this, Ankhesenamun disappears from historical records. Her tomb has never been found, and her mummy has not been identified. Her fate is one of ancient Egypt's lingering mysteries. Your involvement begins when an archaeologist friend working in the Valley of the Kings invites you to examine a piece of jewelry recovered from a tomb robber's cache. It is a gold ring inscribed with the cartouches of Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun side by side. The piece is rare, hinting at a dual reign. When you hold the ring, it feels unexpectedly warm, despite the cool laboratory. The warmth spreads through your fingers, as if the gold carries residual heat. You notice a faint scent of lotus, the flower associated with rebirth. As you study the inscriptions under magnification, the room seems to narrow. In your peripheral vision, a figure in a pleated white dress appears standing near the doorway. She wears a blue and gold headdress. Your heart jumps. You blink and the figure is gone. The ring cools. On your skin, a faint imprint of the cartouches remains, fading as you watch. You laugh nervously and tell your friend, who raises an eyebrow. "We've all had moments," she says. Later, you consider that the warmth could be due to your own body heat conducting into the metal. Gold retains heat well. The lotus scent may have been from the conservation lab's supplies. Oils infused with blue lotus are sometimes used. The fleeting vision could have been triggered by focusing your eyes through magnification, causing an afterimage combined with your knowledge of who Ankhesenamun was. The imprint on your skin might be pressure marks from gripping the ring, yet the experience leaves you pondering the queen's fate. You research the Hittite letters and the possibility that she was forced to marry disappearing into his household. Some scholars think she was buried in one of the many unidentified tombs in the Valley of the Kings, or in Amarna. Genetic tests on unidentified female mummies have yet to link one to her conclusively. The ring you held is tangible proof of her partnership with Tutankhamun. Its survival suggests others might exist, perhaps in yet unopened tombs. Theories about Ankhesenamun's fate include death in childbirth, murder by a rival or exile. The Hittite letter hints at desperation. She did not want to marry a commoner, suggesting she feared internal factions. I's rapid ascension implies she may have been sidelined. A burial wine jar found in Tutankhamun's tomb bears an inscription of the great royal wife Ankhesenamun, indicating she survived him, but not for long. The ring with dual cartouches could mean they ruled jointly at some point. Some propose that one of the two female mummies found in KV-21 is Ankhesenamun. DNA analysis is inconclusive. The presence you sensed in the lab is likely psychological, but it underscores the power of objects to evoke those lost. Ancient Egyptians believed names and images kept a person's soul alive. By holding the ring and saying her name, you participated in that act. After returning home, you occasionally feel a warmth when handling old jewelry. You dream of a queen walking through columns of an unfinished temple, her sandals quiet on the sandstone. She looks over her shoulder as if someone follows. In the dream, she asks, "Will you remember me?" You wake with the taste of lotus on your tongue. Ankhesenamun's fate remains unknown, but the ring and your brief irrational vision remind you that history is populated by people whose lives did not always end in clear narratives. Sometimes the only trace left is a piece of gold, inscribed with two names warm in your hand and resonant in your mind. Real age of the Sphinx, weathering the timeline. The Great Sphinx of Giza, carved from limestone bedrock, is conventionally dated to around 2500 BCE during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre. Its body bears deep vertical fissures and undulating hollows. In the 90s, geologist Robert Schulk argued that this weathering pattern resulted from prolonged rainfall rather than wind and sand, suggesting the Sphinx may be thousands of years older, dating to a wetter period before 5000 BCE. This hypothesis implies that an advanced pre-dynastic civilization carved the monument, upending established timelines. Egyptologists counter that the weathering can be explained by groundwater erosion, and that there is no archaeological evidence of a civilization capable of building the Sphinx so early. Debate continues between geologists and archaeologists, making the Sphinx's age one of Egypt's most contentious mysteries. Your role in this debate begins when a geologist friend invites you to accompany a survey team conducting non-invasive ultrasonic testing of the Sphinx's subsurface. "We need an extra pair of hands to handle cables," she says. You arrive at dawn, the limestone monument emerging from pink morning light. The air is cool, carrying the scent of dew and exhaust from tour buses. The Sphinx's inscrutable face, worn by millennia, watches the east. As you help connect sensors, you run your fingers over the stone. The surface feels smoother in some areas, deeply pitted in others. The team begins sending sound waves into the rock to map internal cracks. On the monitor, the waves appear as colorful lines. As you watch, a deep vibration travels through the ground like a distant truck passing. The seismograph shows nothing unusual, yet you feel the vibration in your chest. The Sphinx's lips seem to twitch in the corner of your eye, as if about to speak. A low rumble echoes from within the limestone. You glance at your friend. She looks puzzled. The rumble subsides. You laugh nervously and continue working. After the survey, you discuss the rumble. Your friend suggests that a passing metro train could have caused vibrations, though none run near the plateau. Wind gusts can create resonant hums when passing through tunnels and cavities. The Sphinx has hidden chambers and cracks that might amplify sound. The apparent twitch in the lips could be an optical illusion as sunlight shifts and casts shadows. Later that day, you tour the Sphinx enclosure. A guide explains that some fissures result from salt crystallization and cycles of humidity. You note that the deepest weathering is on the Sphinx's sides facing north and south, which would receive less rain than the back. This supports wind erosion. However, the hollows are rounded more like water-worn rock. You read studies about climate shifts in the Sahara. There were indeed wetter periods earlier than the dynastic era. Could the Sphinx have been carved then and later recarved? There is evidence that the head's proportions differ from the body's, suggesting reworking. Without inscriptions, the monument's age remains uncertain. Theories about the Sphinx's age fall into two camps. Mainstream Egyptologists maintain a 4th dynasty date based on architectural context and carvings of Khafra near the Sphinx. Geological theories propose earlier dates due to water erosion patterns. Some fringe theorists connect the Sphinx to Atlantis or lost civilizations. Recent studies using microfossils in the limestone and analysis of tool marks support the conventional dating. Yet the weathering debate persists partly because the Sphinx is unique. No other monument combines such a massive scale with a blend of human and lion features. The vibration you felt could be microseismic activity or anthropogenic noise from the city. Or, as your imagination suggested, perhaps the Sphinx does remember rain and speaks through stone. The structure may resonate at certain frequencies, producing low hums when excited by wind or ground movements. After leaving Giza, you occasionally feel a subtle rumble when touching old stone buildings. You dream of the Sphinx emerging from sand, its head carved first by unknown hands. In the dream, rain falls on the plateau, carving hollows. Millennia later, Egyptians recarve the head to resemble a pharaoh. The monument hums with history. You wake, the vibration still in your chest. The Sphinx's age may remain debated, but standing at its paws, feeling a deep rumble, and seeing shadows play across its face, you sense that history leaves traces not only in inscriptions, but in weathered stone and the way it resonates under your touch. Beast of Gévaudan, Predator of Gévaudan. Between 1764 and 1767, the French province of Gévaudan was terrorized by a creature that attacked shepherds and peasants, reportedly killing over 100 people. Witnesses described a wolf-like beast of unusual size with reddish fur, a broad chest, and an infernal gaze. Royal hunts were organized. Professional wolf hunters were dispatched. Dozens of wolves were slain, yet the attacks continued. Eventually, a local hunter named Jean Chastel is said to have killed the monster with silver bullets, but the identity of the beast remains debated. Some historians believe it was a pack of wolves. Others propose an exotic animal escaped from a menagerie. The legend persists in French folklore, symbolizing fear of the wild and of unseen predators. Your interest is piqued when a folklorist from Clermont-Ferrand sends you a brittle leather-bound journal discovered in an old farmhouse attic. The journal belonged to a 1760s nobleman who joined one of the royal hunting parties. The writing is in ornate script describing long days in forests, cold nights by campfires, and repeated sightings of the beast. Oddly, several pages have been cut out. Margins bear sketches, a massive canine silhouette and a pair of eyes. The folklorist suspects the missing pages contain descriptions deemed too disturbing to keep. He asks if you will visit Gévaudan, now part of Lozère, to search for local memories and perhaps find the missing pages. You accept, drawn by the blend of history and myth. The region is pastoral and serene in summer. Rolling hills covered in heather and broom stretch under an expansive sky. Farmhouses sit among fields of cattle. The air smells of hay and pine resin. You stay in an inn whose walls display woodcuts depicting the beast. Villagers speak matter-of-factly about the story, as if discussing a neighbor. An elderly shepherd tells you that on foggy mornings he still feels the creature's presence. You hike to the forested slopes of Mont Mouchet, carrying the nobleman's journal. In a glade where he once camped according to his entries, you sit under an oak tree and read aloud his words about waiting for the beast with muskets loaded. As dusk falls, mist creeps between the trees. Crickets begin their chorus. In the gathering darkness, you hear a howl in the distance, a deep resonant sound that echoes through the valley. It starts as a lupine cry but lengthens unnaturally, pitch rising until it morphs into something disturbingly human-like. The laughter, if it can be called that, seems to come from all directions at once. Every hair on your body stands up. The forest feels suddenly claustrophobic. You call out, but your voice is swallowed. The laughter fades into silence as quickly as it began. You are left with your pounding heartbeat and the rustling of leaves. You return to the inn shaken. The next day, you ask residents if anyone else heard the howl laughter. Most shake their heads. One woman says her grandmother used to tell children that the beast could mimic voices to lure them into the woods. You visit the local archives and read reports from the 1760s. Accounts of attacks are often second-hand, but some victims who survived described being stalked by an animal that seemed almost unafraid of musket fire. Hunters shot wolves, and often normal wolves were found with their stomachs cut open to examine contents, yet still the beast persisted. The nobleman's journal mentions meeting Jean Chastel, a man with piercing eyes who believed the beast was sent by God to punish the wicked. Chastel's own account of shooting the beast states he recited prayers over his bullets. Scholars note that after Chastel's kill, reports ceased, but the missing pages from the nobleman's journal remain elusive. Explanations abound. One theory suggests the beast was a striped hyena or an escaped lioness, animals whose physical features roughly match descriptions and whose behavior would be unfamiliar to rural French villagers. Another proposes it was a wolf-dog hybrid of large size, perhaps wearing boar hide armor, crafted by a human sadist, seeking revenge on the community. A more psychological interpretation is that the attacks were committed by wolves, but hysteria and sensational reporting transformed them into one monstrous predator. The unnatural howl laughter you heard could have been two wolves vocalizing sequentially, your mind weaving the sounds together. Yet some insist the beast was a supernatural creature, a lycanthrope explaining why bullets seem to have little effect. The missing journal pages, if found, might have contained a confession or a description of the beast's carcass that did not align with wolves or hyenas. As for your auditory experience in the forest, skeptics might blame wind through hollows or the echo of a fox's scream distorted by hills. You leave Gévaudan without finding the missing pages, but the villagers give you a parting gift, a small silver charm depicting a wolf. They say it wards off predators. That night at your home, as you place the charm on your desk, you catch a faint whiff of damp fur. Perhaps it's a memory triggered by your visit. Weeks later, the folklorist sends you a parcel. Inside are the missing pages. A farmer discovered them, tucked behind a beam during renovations. The pages describe an encounter between the nobleman and the beast. He writes that when he shot it, it stood upright like a man laughed like a woman and then fell forward. The description matches the howl laughter you heard. The pages end with the nobleman concluding he will never speak of it again for fear of ridicule. The beast of Gévaudan remains a tangle of fact exaggeration and fear, its laughter echoing in forests and in journals centuries later. Royal Palace of Madrid treasure, royal secrets in stone. The Royal Palace of Madrid, one of Europe's largest palaces, houses centuries of Spanish monarchs' possessions. Legends persist that during times of war and upheaval, kings and queens hid treasures within its walls and foundations. In particular, rumors tell of a treasure meant to fund Charles III's empire that disappeared, possibly hidden somewhere in the palace. Despite renovations and modern security, occasional workers and historians whisper about sealed chambers, bricked-up corridors, and unexplained voids in the floor plan. No confirmed treasure has been recovered, but the palace's sheer size and history fuel speculation. Your involvement arises when a museum curator contacts you about an anomaly discovered during routine structural maintenance. "We've found a void behind a wall in an unused wing," she says. "We'd like an independent observer." You meet her in the opulent halls ornate with frescoes and gilding. The scent of waxed wood and old stone fills the air. She leads you to a plain corridor closed to tourists lit by a single bulb. Workers have removed a panel of plaster revealing bricks. A thermal camera shows a cooler area behind. Carefully, they remove bricks and a narrow passage appears. Dust motes dance in your flashlight beam. You crawl inside. The air is stale cooler. After a few feet, the passage widens into a small stone chamber. On the floor lies a wooden chest rotted at the edges. You feel your heart race. You approach, noticing a metallic scent like old coins. When you touch the chest, something jingles inside. You lift the lid. Inside are neatly stacked leather bags. You open one. Instead of gold, you find stones, polished river rocks. You frown. Under the bags, however, you find a leather-bound ledger detailing Imprestito Secreto, secret loan, with entries of amounts and dates. The last line reads, "Deposited to the fund of the palace, 1760. As you read, a faint whisper seems to come from the walls like rustling paper. The scent of metal intensifies. You feel a brief chill, then warmth. The jingling stops, though you aren't moving the chest. Back in the curator's office, you examine the ledger. It appears to record funds collected from nobles to finance a clandestine project. The polished stones may have replaced coins to mislead later searchers. Perhaps the real treasure was moved. The whisper you heard could have been air moving through cracks as cooler chamber air mixed with the corridor. The metallic scent may have emanated from corroding iron nails in the chest. The jingling might have been caused by your motion or a small animal shifting inside the chest. You research the historical context. Charles III funded public works and colonial ventures, sometimes through secret loans. Unspent funds could have been hidden to avoid seizure during the Napoleonic invasion. Several rooms in the palace were sealed during construction to create symmetry, potentially concealing caches. There have been reports of maintenance workers stumbling upon hidden staircases leading nowhere. No documented treasures have been found, but the palace's complexity leaves room for speculation. Theories about hidden royal treasures span many European palaces. Some suggest that jewels and gold were smuggled out during invasions, others that they remain behind false walls. In Madrid's case, the palace has survived fires and occupation. It is plausible that valuables were hidden. Treasure hunters often overlook that monarchs kept wealth in banks and dispersed around estates. The ledger you found may hold clues, names, and amounts could correspond to specific nobles. Historians might trace where the funds went. The whispering and metallic odor you experienced are likely environmental. Yet being in a hidden chamber under a palace chest in hand invites the mind to conjure whispers of intrigue. Maybe the stones were decoys intended to be weight substitutes for removed coins. Or maybe the treasure was knowledge, the ledger itself documenting financial schemes. After leaving Madrid, you sometimes smell old coins when handling antique books. You dream of crawling through narrow passages lined with stone, hearing the chink of coins, only to find smooth stones and a ledger. The palace remains majestic above ground, but below there may still be secrets. Whether or not vast treasure lies hidden, the experience reminds you that behind grandeur there can be improvised hiding places and stories of desperation. The ledger will go to historians, and perhaps one day someone will follow its entries to another chamber. Or perhaps the real treasure of the royal palace is not gold, but the layers of stories embedded in its walls.